You've said you're not an actor because of training. You train because you're already wired this way. When did you first realize the craft was a symptom of who you are, not the cause?
I probably realized it when I was training with Aaron Spicer, um, somewhere in Beverly Hills, Hollywood adjacent. He's actually one of the few coaches in the country who go on set to work with his actors while they're filming. Will Smith is his most notable client. He works with Gerard Butler. At one point, he was known as the rapper's acting coach because he coached J Lo early in her career, LL Cool J, and a whole laundry list of names. I'm not name dropping, I really don't care, but I'm just telling you, giving you some context as to who he is and what he's known for. So I went to his class. He's a fellow New Yorker originally, transplant. He kind of speaks our language, direct, blunt, rude at times. So I did the technique course, which is a prerequisite if you don't have credits to enter into his acting studio at the time, which was years ago. And I did the technique course. In my mind, I'm burning. You have all sorts of thoughts like, maybe he can introduce me. He'll see how talented I am and he'll introduce me to Will Smith. You just have these thoughts. I'm not saying they're valid and you even, you know, buy into it yourself, but these are the types of thoughts that actors have. And other actors recognize this. So they have that actor detector, meter built in. But I'm just telling you the types of thoughts that I and other actors have and have had. So I finally get through the 8 to 10 week technique course, which teaches you basic acting techniques, fourth wall, how to draw emotions, something called My Uncle Fred, which is where you're saying a eulogy, but instead of Uncle Fred, you replace Uncle Fred with somebody you actually know. So it makes it real to you. These basic actors' techniques. And me, I'm coming straight off the street, but I'm ready to work. I'm struggling financially. I have a family, I have mouths to feed, so I want to work. So I'm like, let me just get through this thing so I can work with the heralded, Aaron Spicer or whatever. So I get through it, and then I get into his scene study class, which is the next level after technique. And he has something called a master class. So, of course, once I get to the scene study class, I'm ready to go to the master class. I don't want to be in this scene study class with all these wannabe actors, and that thirsty energy, that desperate energy. I want to go straight to the master class. So after the first class, I presented one scene, and then I go into his office and I say, I think I belong in your master class. And again, this is straight off the street. And I think he's going to either curse me out, laugh at me, or kick me out of his school. But he looks at me and he smiles. He has this big smile and he goes, I agree. Come to the, master class next week. So now I think I'm all that or whatever, or confirms what I already knew. I'm a natural or whatever. So I go to his master class and every scene that I present, I kill it, right? So that's kind of when I first, realized that, I'm already wired this way. Most of the things that I learned in the technique class and the scene study class, other than technicals and the acting jargon and stuff, I found that I was already doing instinctually. So it wasn't, far fetched and it wasn't BS. This inner knowing that I had that I can act. I wasn't just simply psychotic and said, hey, I can act. I actually could act. And that class and that experience confirmed it for me. It just gave me the labels, it gave me an extra couple of tools in the tool shed, and it enabled me to draw on these things at will. So that was the differentiation. But again, I was doing most of these things instinctually. So that's when I first realized that the craft was a symptom and not a cure. I'm not like a lot of the other actors who, went to conservatory or trained with Yale Theater Company. or even studied with multiple acting, coaches like Ivana Chubbuck is famous, and you have a bunch of teachers in LA. I just after that class, I kind of realized I don't need the class. So that was my first time that I realized it. And then in hindsight, you know, time is linear, but you recall, old memories that reinforce certain things as well. So I remember after watching Rambo First Blood Part 2, I went home with my buddy. We went to his house and we played Rambo, right? And we lived in Queens, so we had these big metal gates. Literally, he lived on the third floor, but he still had a big metal gate in his window on the third floor because there were fire escapes. So I remember that big metal gate. I played Rambo when he was being electrocuted and then his biceps were bulging. So, of course, 10-year-old me, I was Rambo and my friend was electrocuting me and cutting me with the knife and stuff. So, as silly as that sounds, at the time, I was fully immersed. I was fully bought in. I was fully in that world. I was fully Rambo. So, you remember these little tidbits, that shows you that these things were already internalized, at least your version of it. Again, every actor has their own journey and their own sensibilities and their own processes. And the thing about acting is that anybody can say they're an actor and it would be true. Unlike an electrician, unlike an architect, unlike a plumber, unlike a teacher, where you need an education, certification, you know, whatever, technical stuff and a certificate. Anybody who says they're an actor is an actor, and nobody can tell them otherwise because there's all different types of acting. You have Disney shows and you have, these highbrow Academy Award nominated movies, and you have plays. They need all types of actors. So if you say you're an actor, you're an actor. Nobody can tell you otherwise, right? So that's something that I think, people should keep with them. Don't let anybody tell you you're not an actor. You are an actor. If you say you are, if you feel you are, the only question is what type of acting do you do? And what is your goal? What type of medium do you want to act in?
Most actors study technique to find truth. You seem to find truth first and use technique to contain it. What's the difference from the inside?
Yeah, this is kind of leaning into the first question again. I didn't say I wanted to be an actor. My parents didn't push me to be an actor. It just kind of happened. It's one of those deals. So the only way that I know how to act is to use, my experiences, my sensibilities, my instincts, the so-called truth, to bring truth into the scene and into the character's life. So that's the way that I act. Again, I've picked up technical stuff along the way, but for the most part, I use and lean on my life experience, the character and the scene study. That's the most important thing. Most of the acting happens before you get to set. You read the script, that's biblical law, if you will. Whatever the writer gave you, you have those pillars that you can't change. Your name is this, you're from here, you have a family or you don't have a family, you have kids or you don't have kids, whatever it may be. You're an athlete or you're a chef, whatever you are. Those are the parameters and the pillars. And then between those things, that's what your job is. It's to fill in the blanks between those pillars. And the challenge is to make the most appropriate choices within those pillars, within the context of the story in its entirety. So it's imperative, not important, to read the entire story, regardless of whether you're in the scene or not, or whatever it may be, regardless of whether you have a small part or a big part. You have to know the entire context in order to make the most appropriate choices for you as the character. So, for example, if you're a chef and you live in New York, you're not going to say you go to Paris on every weekend. That's just not feasible. Maybe once a year to study gastronomy or whatever it may be. So what the director gives you informs your other choices, and it's your job to make the most appropriate and hopefully the most intelligent, for lack of a better word, choices within those parameters. And that's actually your job. So I always use the architect as an example, as a parallel to an actor. If somebody hires you, you don't go on to that mountain site and say, yeah, I'll build a house. And then that day you start getting the wood and start building the house, right? It takes months, if not years, of planning. You got to do the mathematics of it. You got to survey the land. You have to see where the water is, where the plumbing is going to go, where the light, where the sunlight is, and orient yourself, your design towards that. And an actor really is no different, right? Instead of the landscape, though, you have the script, which is the landscape. And from there, you can work around that and incorporate your character or your house into that landscape or into that world. So that's the challenge. That's the excitement of being an actor. In my opinion, that's my point of view. A lot of people, unfortunately, they'll read the script, worst case scenario, and there's other worst scenarios like they won't even know their lines, let alone read the script. But aside from that, they'll read the script, they'll memorize their lines, and they'll rehearse their lines. I'm gonna say, John, get the hell out of here. John, get the hell out of here. John, get the hell out of here. Whatever. Say it 20 different times. I'm gonna say it this way. Like that's the worst case scenario. That's not what acting is, in my opinion. But again, it depends on what type of acting you do. If you're doing Joe Schmo's, holiday play at the local theater, maybe that'll fly. Maybe that'll be entertaining, more entertaining than my process. But in terms of my goals and the medium that I want to act in, this is the way that I work.
You talk about thousands of processes happening in a 40-second interaction. Walk me through one, a real one. What's actually happening in your head?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe because of the way that I work, and again, because of my lack of formal training, right? I work in you know in this interactive way. I guess kind of like a musician. You have classically trained musicians, pianists, violinists, right? They know the scales, they practice the notes, they can play anything that you put in front of them. And then you have other musicians who taught themselves, so to speak. So you can put something in front of them. The way they play is repetition, right? And through sounds. So that's kind of the way that I act. So there's pros and cons to everything. Maybe there's some technical things that I may lack, or maybe not, but you know I try to live in the moment. And I know that sounds cliche, but let me give you an example to kill the cliche. So one of my last auditions, it was an interrogation scene. I had cop A here, cop B there. It's a self-tape, so you gotta just do it this way. You're imagining these things and these people. You're basically acting like you're crazy, right? Because there's nobody there. But you have cop A, good cop, bad cop, so to speak. And then it says that forensics or one of the cops takes my phone in the beginning of the scene, and at the end of the scene, that same cop takes my laptop. However, the phone is not mine in the beginning of the scene, and the laptop is mine. So knowing these things, you build a real world out of it. You have, again, the technical things, you incorporate it with the life experience. So you have the fourth wall, you place the door there, cops here, cops there. I had the forensics naturally on the side of the door because they're going in and out of the door. So these are technical things. You need these things. You're not just going to imagine the whole world and make it up as you go along, because you have to indicate to whoever's watching what's happening. You have to orient them because they're not in your head, right? So these are the technical things. But after that, I didn't just stare at the guy grabbing the phone and then stare at him, leaving the room. I guess you can do that, but that's where you have creative liberty, right? So my attention is on cop A. That's who, initialized the conversation, and she's grilling me. So it's like this. And then the corner of my eye, I notice movement near my bag. That's the key. If you see somebody, near your belongings, naturally, whether you stare at them or look at them or not, your attention is drawn there. You may hide that attention. You can kind of like peek or cheat with your periphery, or just let your feelers all come out without looking. You're feeling now. Kind of like if you're on the train, for those of you who ever took public transportation, and you see somebody you just get weird vibes from, you're not going to look at them because you don't want to instigate anything, but your feelers are now all activated, right? So that's what happened. So my feelers is activated because this cop, this stranger is near my bag. What are they doing near my shit, right? So it's kind of one of these things. Look, kind of peek real quick. Who is it? A microsecond, and then it's like, what are they grabbing? They grab the phone, and then as they're leaving, it's kind of a double take, right? And then it's back to cop A, and hey, that's not my phone. I don't know how that got there. You see what I'm saying? So that's what happened. So, and then at the end of the scene, the same cop is back from taking the phone to evidence or whatever they did, bagged and tagged it. But this time, I noticed them at my bag, and at this point, we're through a whole conversation. We went through this whole engaged conversation back and forth. So my attention is now more towards cop A, cop B, who's over there now. He kind of drifted off to the side, right? So these are the technical things again that you're working through as you're living in the moment. That's why it's imperative to live in the moment, because the scene gives you these cues. So I notice again the cop. So it's like, wait a minute. But it's like, wait, are they taking my laptop? Like, hey, that's mine. Why are you taking my laptop? And of course, as you know, your phone, your laptop, those are two of the most personal things. You have family pictures. You know, you may have unsavory things in there, whatever. You have personal documents, tax return, whatever, your address. So now it's like, hey, that's my laptop. What's going on? Like, what? But I'm not saying it to them because they're the robot, just following orders. So it's like, hey, that's my laptop. And then it's back to cop A. What? That's my lap. What are they doing with my laptop? And then she says her line, oh, we have to take it for evidence and blah, 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 blah. So that's, an example of living in the scene. So, this isn't for a lead role in a feature film. This is a guest star, a few scenes in the episode type of a deal, but it still gives you ample opportunity to show your technical expertise and also to show your personality and show your quirks and show how you act in a real setting. And that's what I did.
20 years of one-liners while carrying Pacino in your chest. How did you not quit?
Yeah, I'm sure 99.99% of actors can relate to this, right? Unless you're really lucky and perfect looking like a Chris Hemsworth and a Margot Robbie, and you get discovered right away or whatever at a coffee shop. But even these people, I'm sure they went through their auditions and struggles and trials and tribulations. But for the most part, the majority of actors, fail, first of all. I think some crazy statistic, 95% of actors in LA make less than the minimum, threshold to get health insurance, like 40,000. Similar to real estate agents, I think 90%, and don't quote me on these statistics, but I'm just trying to give you the idea. 90% of real estate agents never sell a house. They have the license. They say they're agents, but they never sell anything, right? And the 1% are the ones who actually make money. I think acting is similar to this. So yeah, you have this inspiration, this burning desire, financial need and dreams, and whatever else that's mixed in there in this gumbo pot, and you watch your heroes like Pacino or whoever that may be, and you feel this huge inspiration, and then you're like, yeah, I got an audition. You get the email ping and you look at it and it's Pizza Hut delivery boy. Here's your pizza, so you go through 10 years of that, 20 years of that, and you have this huge conflict because you have this desire to be Pacino-like. And I'll stop doing this. This is a bad habit. But you want to be Pacino-like, but you're getting, the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to the opportunity, right? And that's a torment in and of itself. And that's probably why, again, don't quote me, 99.99% of actors go back home to Missouri, right? Or Kentucky or Rhode Island or wherever the hell they came from, right? Because you have these lofty goals and dreams, and most of them misguided and delusional. And you find that the opportunities are minuscule, and it's really a cutthroat, business of the highest order and on the highest level. So these opportunities are afforded only to those in the know. Networking is huge, and who happen to be at the right place at the right time. And of course, underneath that all, you need to have the goods. You need to have the talent, the technical expertise, and also bring something unique to the table.
How do you know if a take is good? Or what is a good take to you? Is it about feel? What's a bad take?
So it's kind of funny how all of the questions continue off of the first question. Really, it depends on your style of acting, depending on how you know if a take is good or not. Again, good is subjective. Some people like the actors from Glee, happy go lucky, and I'm not knocking them, trust me. You need all types of products. This is commerce, it's show business. You need Coca-Cola, you need smoothies, you need turmeric shots, you need distilled water, you need fruit punch, the 25-cent quarter drinks for those of you from New York from the 80s and 90s. You need everything, right? That's what's beautiful about the world, variety. So, you know, for me, I go by feel because of the way that I act, because of the way that I was taught or not taught, right? I know how it feels, just like in life, and my acting, style has come from my life. Ever since I was a kid, I knew there was something different, about me. And I'm not saying different in a good way necessarily, but I just knew every time I was in a room, I was always a sponge. I would feel out, why is my mom more talkative right now? Why is my dad so quiet right now? How come they act different when they're at dinner with their friends than when they're at church or when they're at home? How come this? How come that? Every single time, just naturally, it was a natural inclination. And I guess you could say that was my search for the truth. But at all times, it's like a truth sponge. And I'm not saying truth in a moral or good way, saying that I'm better than anybody, but I just mean, what is the truth? Why? Why? I guess you could say inquisitive is a better word than truth. So that inclination and that mode of being is really what at the core enables me to act, because the same thing happens when I'm doing the character and the scene research, as well as when I'm actually in the scene doing the take. The same processes, as we talked about, micro processes, is happening. It's second nature to me. It's ingrained in me. So while I'm acting with I'm gonna tie my hands. While I'm acting with somebody, that's what's happening. I know the lines. I know what they're supposed to say. I know what I'm supposed to say. But the trick or the illusion is to make it seem like it's the first time you're hearing it and the first time you're saying it, right? So that's what's happening, and that's the filter through which all of this information is getting processed. What's happening? Why is this happening? Why are they acting different? Is there anything that I should know? Again, it's just my natural inclination. I guess it's the actor's survival mechanism, or my survival mechanism in the realm of acting. That's how I'm able to act. Everything goes through that same filter, and I just happen to be able to act because of this same childhood sensibility.
The immigrant kid whose parents worked 16-hour days, how much of this drive is ambition, and how much is reclaiming something that was taken?
Everything's related, even if it's not the driving force, or even if you don't keep it in mind or articulate it. To say that your parents working 16 hours a day doesn't drive you, or at least affect you, that's an impossibility, right? I mean, I distinctly recall, 3 a.m., I hear my dad's alarm, and then I hear the alarm slam. And I hear him throw on his coat. We're in New York, it's freezing, and he has to go to Fulton Fish Market, right? And pick out the best fish. The earlier you go, the better fish you get, right? He's a fishmonger in Brooklyn. So the times when I did wake up when I heard that, because I was in the room next to my parents, I felt pain. I felt his pain. The last thing you want to do when you're exhausted, and he's not a young kid, right? He's an older guy, right? Is get out of bed. It's freezing. You got to go out there. And then not only that, after you get the fish and you get to the store by 6, 7 a.m., you're doing a 12-hour day and you don't get off till 8 p.m. So 3 a.m. to 8 p.m. And as ignorant as I was as to, the grown-up world and paying bills and having kids and things like that at the time, it still hurt me to the core. So I'm sure that has some psychological scars. I'm sure that contributes to the drive, to the ambition, and then of course my mother would join him at 8 a.m. and she would make me breakfast or take me to school or whatever she can, squeeze in there, always moving at 1,000 miles per hour, right? To be able to get to work by 8 a.m. to help my dad out. And of course, she doesn't get out till 8 p.m. If she's lucky, she leaves half an hour early so she could rush home to make his dinner. And then she has to clean up after that, right? So the pain, you recall it being in the moment, in those moments, but more of the pain comes in hindsight, sitting here now and going through it after they're gone, right? You realize you could have done so much more. Not necessarily in terms of action, because if you're a kid, how much can you actually do? More so in terms of the appreciation you could have shown them while you were privy to this, watching this every single day. But of course, you lean on that, excuse of ignorance. You don't know. But now that you're a parent, you've gone through these responsibilities and having kids, of course, in hindsight, you realize all these things, which is why, of course, your parents, particularly my mom, would always say, don't wait till I'm gone to appreciate me now. And of course, she said that because her mom said that to her, my grandma, right? So it's the beautiful sorrow of life, everything's full-sided. There's not just one side, there's yin and yang, black and white, so to speak. So there's the beauty of the love that your parents give to you and leave with you, because it lasts forever, doesn't it? But then there's also the pain on the other side of that. Again, like I said, the appreciation you could have shown, the help you could have given, more help and things like that. And then that gives you the completed circle, which is beauty in and of itself. The love with the pain makes the full circle. So neither side is bad, neither side is good. You take both of it.
You've called fame a monster, but you're building a platform. How do you want what you're building to be different from what you're critiquing?
Yeah, I did call fame a monster. That was my last series of videos. I wasn't trying to play games, I was just talking about something I needed to get off my chest. For years I thought about this. Hey, what if your dreams actually come true? What if you actually become that guy on the billboard? What if it's your face on thousands of movie posters? What if it's your face on that t-shirt 200 years from now after you're long gone? What if it's you, as a public figure? You can't go back. You can't become unfamous. If you become famous, like let's say Brad Pitt, I always use him for example, Brad Pitt. He can't become unfamous. Even if his next 10 movies flop, he'll still be famous. Maybe not in a good way, maybe infamous, but what does he do? Let's say he does a bad investment and he goes broke. That's happened before, right? Or, he has to go to court for something and he loses his fortune, whatever. What is he going to do? He's going to move into the apartment next to you? He won't be able to live a life. He has to forever keep bringing in boatloads of money to insulate himself from the public. Not because he thinks he's better than everybody else, but because his level of notoriety is so off the charts. How can you possibly interact with, the masses? You can't. It's a physical impossibility. So that would give me anxiety attacks. That would give me panic attacks, throughout the years. Like, dude, do you know what you're doing? What if this actually happens? What are you going to do? Like I use this example, you go to India or Calcutta or wherever the hell, and you're floating down the Ganges in a boat, to get away from America and Hollywood. And next thing you know, an old lady's just going about her business, going home. And then she sees you and her eyes get wide. She says, "Oh, Brad Pitt or Billy Choi. Oh my God. Oh." You think that's not going to give you a panic attack? Or you think that's funny? It's funny because it's not you. But what if it's you? What if you can't walk into a coffee shop? What if you need security and you're paying each of these people 100 grand a year and you have to keep paying each of these people 100 grand a year for the rest of your life? Does that sound like fun to you? If you're a Floyd Mayweather, you've seen him, right? He has 6 huge ass bodyguards, right? He doesn't have one bodyguard because he puts himself out there. His notoriety is not on par with Brad Pitt, but the way his notoriety is built, it's on having money. He carries cash, jewelry, women, whatever. So he makes himself a peculiar and a particular type of a target. That's why he has 6 bodyguards, and Brad Pitt may only need 2. Kim Kardashian, her hotel got robbed, or whatever the case may be. Whatever type of notoriety and whatever you've built your fame upon, that's the level of security you're going to need, right? Denzel is more low-key, quiet. He may not need security, or maybe he'll need 1 security guard. I don't know. But you understand what I'm saying to you here, right? So even if it's not you, what if it's somebody you love and you care about? What if Floyd Mayweather or Brad Pitt was your brother or your sister or your uncle or your father or whatever, and you actually cared about them? You would put a little bit more thought into it, right? Not just, oh my God, it's Brad Pitt. Can I have your autograph? Your life is great. You have everything. You know, wasn't he an alcoholic? Didn't he have cases for like child abuse and all these other things, allegedly? Does that kind of show you something? A little peek into his world that at the very least, things are not perfect and ideal, and you don't want to be Brad Pitt. In some senses, Brad Pitt's a hero for having the courage to accept this yoke of notoriety and fame for the sake of his art. He actually started, I don't know where he is now, but he actually started as a serious artist. He studied, he worked on his craft, he did some serious work, 12 Monkeys and 7, and so he sacrificed a lot of his personal, preferences for his art. So in some senses, he is a hero,
What does a bad day look like for someone operating at your frequency?
I mean, just like everybody else, you have your run-of-the-mill bad days, arguments with significant others, kids drive you crazy, things aren't going the way that you want it. But at this particular juncture, a bad day is created for myself, by myself. It's when I start getting ahead of myself that makes the bad day. So, for example, if I wake up and immediately the first thought is, where are all the auditions? How am I ever going to build a career if I'm not even getting the opportunity? That's the start of a bad day. The chase, I guess you can say. So and again, you're creating your own bad day. But if I wake up and I don't have that thought, and I tell myself, this is a good day. I look outside, whether it's cloudy or sunny, I say, this is a nice day. This is going to be a good day. And regardless of whether I get that audition or not, it usually is a good day, because I feel good and I'm not, outwardly, searching or wanting something. So it's the want that creates the bad day. And the key is, and the funny thing is, and this is why life is such a tragic comedy, some people may look at me, right, as funny as it sounds, and be like, hey man, you're so far along, you're in the union. Some people, that's their lifelong goal, to join SAG. At one point, that was my main goal, right, to join SAG. Other people is to have a credit under their belt after they join SAG. Other people is to, look a certain way or whatever, right? And then from my point of view, I'll look at a Brad Pitt and be like, oh man, if only I had, a career like his or an Academy Award like his. And then you go into Brad Pitt's shoes and it's like, when's my next Academy Award opportunity coming? Why am I getting all these shit scripts? How come my production company is on a downtrend? Whatever it may be. Maybe it's a family thing that causes his dissatisfaction. The bottom line is everybody, it has the potential to have dissatisfaction. You could have the toughest guy from the hood who loses a loved one from a violent crime, or you can have a suburban teenager from Calabasas whose best friend doesn't like her outfit The pain that she feels and the pain that he feels is both immeasurable pain, as funny as that sounds. So how can we laugh at the teenager from Calabasas's pain, just like we wouldn't laugh at the tough guy from the hood's pain for something like that? Who are we to deem, what warrants your pain? So Joe Blow actor with all the accolades who just won the Golden Globe, he could be miserable because he has to play something he doesn't want to play the next time, or maybe he hates acting or whatever, right? So you have these cliches, the grass is greener on the other side. This is where these cliches come from. At the end of the day, the important thing is not to measure yourself against others, but to stay guarded within yourself. And I gave you that example when I wake up and I say it's going to be a good day, as opposed to where's all my freaking auditions? How the hell am I ever going to advance when I'm already at, step A, right? It's not like I'm at step P even. I have 10 films under my belt or whatever the hell it may be, right? I just wake up and I say it's going to be a good day, and it's a good day.
If the series are regular books tomorrow, does anything actually change?
I thought about this too, aside from the fame angle and aspect. What if you do get what you want? You get the lead in the feature film, or you get to act alongside, whoever today's De Niro or Pacino may be, or your script gets optioned or whatever the hell, right? And I sat there. Usually this happens in hindsight on miserable days, right? When I just don't feel good, right? Mentally. And this thought always comes to me. So I know this is not coming from me. It's coming from somewhere else. It's trying to teach me something, which is you have your career where you want it. Your finances are in order. You don't have to worry about, bills and your family and things like that. You're still going to be the same miserable son of a bitch. You know that. Accept that. Hope that changes, and there's potential for change. That's not locked in. But if it happened right now, right behind this next second threshold, you have 5 movies, you have $10 million, you have homes, you have whatever you may have, you have next year booked out. Are you going to feel any different? Be real about it. And I know this is not coming from me. I really do, because it's not. It's random thoughts that just come in, right? And I have to be honest with myself and say, no, I'm still going to feel like this. I'm still going to feel unfulfilled. I'm still going to feel somewhat hopeless, not desperately hopeless, but some level of hopelessness, right? There's still going to be the existential questions. There's still going to be the shadows of loneliness lingering. There's still going to be the familial issues. There's still going to be the questions about friends. There's still going to be everything else that's already there. Those don't disappear with a booking. Those don't disappear with a full bank account. And I know that because of the cautionary tales you see of Joe Blow actor or actress, on drugs. Joe Blow actor or actress fights. Joe Blow actor or actress court case. Whatever the hell. These are all cautionary tales. It's telling you something. These people all have what you think you want. Jim Carrey's famous quote that's been quoted ad nauseum. I really hope everybody, gets everything that they want so they can see that it's not the answer. I mean, he pretty much spelled it out, didn't he? Right? So it's nothing profound for me to say this, but I realized it before the realization of the dream. So there's these bubbles and layers, within the dream. You have the suffering of not achieving the dream, and then you have the suffering of knowing after you've achieved the dream, it's still going to be suffering layered on top of that initial wanton, desire. And then you layer that on top of your regular, lack and void that you have as just a human being living through life. So I don't think anything ever changes, whether that be the series regular tomorrow, or whether that be, the biggest movie star on the planet, or whether that be whatever it may be. I don't think that ever changes unless you change it for yourself. And again, I go back to that. Today's going to be a good day. If you're a Keanu Reeves or whoever you are, a Jeff Bezos, you think Jeff Bezos is happy all the time? It has to be pretty damn tough to be Jeff Bezos. You know, you just use your imagination, right? For as much benefits it is to be Jeff Bezos, there's equal amounts of trials and tribulations and peril to be Jeff Bezos, because in life, just like that yin and yang, everything always evens out. Everything. The 15-year-old Calabasas girl may not have to worry about being shot in a drive-by, on her way to private school, getting chauffeured, right? But at the same time, the limit to with which she fully immerses herself in life is going to be capped, because the peril is also limited. Conversely, the dude from the hood who lost his best friend, when that song goes on and he has his drink of choice and he has his meal of choice ready to go, right? And he's set for the weekend, he's going to feel that song 1,000,000 times, literally 1,000,000 times more than that girl will ever feel a Taylor Swift song. So everything balances out. He's not better than the girl, and the girl's not better than the guy. We're all human beings. And if I could encompass what acting is in one sentence, it would be that. We're all victims of the human condition. The sooner we accept that, the sooner we grow and are able to take that first step towards fulfillment and happiness. You end that forever search of the next thing. And I'm using acting as an example, but this goes for everybody. Your promotion at your job, your kid graduating from, whatever school and going to the better college, better finances, the better car, better social circumstance. You want to move to a better neighborhood, whatever it may be, that constant search for the next thing, which will not lead to more happiness. When you're a kid and you got that toy that you were dying for, you wanted the next toy after 3 hours, if you're lucky, right? And then when you got that next toy, you wanted the other toy. And when you got that toy, you're thinking about the other toy. And when it's your birthday, you're thinking about Christmas. That's life. The void never ends unless we end it for ourselves. And I think the first step towards that is having empathy for the human condition, which encompasses yourself. And then from that lens, you could have empathy for others, including that 15-year-old from Calabasas who you think and assume has no problems and no challenges, and she's a spoiled brat, and including that, tough guy from the hood who should have these types of problems because he's tough and he's used to that. That's no empathy. That's no consideration. And that includes and encompasses Brad Pitt. He's a movie star. He's buku rich. What does he care? I don't care about him. He has everything he needs. I have to worry about, my next rent or my groceries or inflation or my gas, whatever. He's a human being. We're all human beings. We're all pathetically human.
You said the thoughts are the substance, and the acting is the proof. Which one are you more proud of?
I'm not proud of either the substance of thoughts or the substance in acting, because they're intertwined in my book. At least, again, that's how I operate. So
Proud.
the thoughts are part of the person, right? And the acting is part of the person. It's not two separate things. I'm not an actor. I'm able to act because of the things that I told you. I had this orientation towards curiosity ever since I was a kid. That over the years, plus life experience, plus a little bit of technical training, plus a lot of thought, enables me to act. But I don't identify as an actor. I don't identify with an actor, right? When an electrician goes home, he's not sitting at home watching his favorite show as the electrician, right? He's not talking to his family as the electrician. He's not going to pick up food or dinner as the electrician. His job is done for the day, right? Acting is no different. I'm able to act. I'm able to do it to the best of my ability, according to what my definition of acting is, right? I'm able to immerse myself in the work and thoroughly enjoy it and be challenged by it. And at the same token, be informed by it, because through the study sometimes, or through the action of acting, you learn about life, and it reflects back to you like a mirror. So it goes both ways, but my end goal is not to be the best actor or the best known actor. Again, I'm going to do it as a professional to the best of my ability, because you have a bunch of collaborators. Again, show business. You have dozens, if not hundreds of people whose livelihoods depend on it. So it's your responsibility as one cog in the wheel. You may be the tip of the spear that appears in front of everybody, but it doesn't make you the most important. You're one cog in the wheel. It doesn't matter if you're the lead or not, right? The real lead is the producer and the producers. Those are the real leads. It's just they're behind the scenes, right? Because they're smart. They don't want to lose their anonymity, you know? So as one cog in the wheel, knowing that all of these people, their livelihoods, their families depend, on maximizing this collaboration, you have to do your due diligence. You have to do your homework. You have to put in the time. You have to show up on time. You have to show up prepared and show up in the best mind frame possible, because you see the entire scope of the operation. Of course, when you're a kid, you see the finished product, you see the lead guy or girl's face, and you think it's all about them. You're a kid, you don't know any better. But come on, as an adult, if you still have even an inkling of that type of rationale, it means you're still a kid. You're still a kid, You have to do your best. You have to be a professional at the end of the day. And that just means having a holistic, balanced lifestyle, diet, exercise to keep your mind clear and focused, temper your chemical usage. I don't drink or do drugs, so I try to stay clear-headed. I noticed that after I stopped eating sugar, which is the biggest drug, I have much more endurance, and I'm able to think much more clearly, and I'm able to work much more efficiently and for longer periods of time. To each their own. I'm not criticizing you. If you do what you do it. You know what I'm saying? I'm just speaking for myself again, because of the style of acting that I employ. So, maybe because I'm not formally trained, maybe because I didn't go to Tisch or Yale Theater, and I didn't do Second City, and I don't have, all of the famous acting teachers, classes under my belt or whatever. I'm not insecure about it. I've read books and whatever, right? I listen to actors, Michael Caine's book, Ivana Chubbuck, Stanislavski, whatever. I read, I study, but in either case, my style of acting, is my style of acting. I'm not saying it's better, or I'm not saying it's worse, but it's my style of acting. So you have your style of acting. You choose your style according to, number one, who you are, your life experience, your sensibilities, the way you are, and the type of acting you'd like to do. That's what's going to inform you of what you'll need. If you're doing a particular type of acting, you love to do plays, Broadway, Shakespeare, you're going to probably need a lot more technical training, including voice training, including physical training, studying with certain teachers, studying certain schools of thought. If you're going to do on film stuff, you're going to need to learn camera technique, what the camera does, camera work, lighting. You're going to need to know these things, so I'm not saying just wing it, but know who you are and know what your goal is, and then you're going to be able to set a realistic plan in place for you to achieve your goals. Don't let anybody tell you, you're not something, because unless you're trying to be an astronaut, you're whatever you say you are. So if you say you're an actor, you're an actor. If you say you're a musician and you pick up the guitar and you're able to play songs and write your own songs, you're a musician, right? There's all different types of actors and musicians. So, that's my school of thought when it comes to acting. It's just an extension of who I am, and that's what keeps me grounded. That's what's going to keep me from having the anxiety attack. If indeed I do achieve some level of notoriety, and if it gets perverse in nature, I don't want to be looking at that monster's eyes, because again, you can't come back from that. So if I take this approach, it's training my nervous system to be prepared for whatever manifests, whatever form that is. I'll be able to live with it and deal with it without having a breakdown, still being able to live a balanced and loving life with my loved ones, and not having to lean on therapists and chemicals, either legal or illegal or both. I'll be able to still be myself, essentially, right? Because I called fame a monster, because once you become that public figure, it's out of your hands. They'll take your picture, they'll recycle it 1,000 to 100 million times, and they'll pump it out into the world. Your image will be blown up and on that screen where people see you as larger than life, even though you're not. You never change. You're always that one mortal entity, but your essence gets spread out. It's on millions of screens simultaneously across the world. Again, you'll be on t-shirts and mugs 500 years, 200 years, 10 years after you're long gone, like Elvis or Tupac or Bob Marley. People will still be capitalizing on your likeness, right? It's not because they love you. It's because they need to pay their mortgage, right? So you have to come to terms with that before that happens. And just like working out, you're not going to go to the gym, on January 2nd and say, I'm going to be buff, right? It's a slow process. You start with push-ups at home. You start walking, and then you slowly go to jogging. You start from 10 push-ups, go to 20 push-ups, and then you go to the gym 3 months later and you do really light weights, maybe just the bar, right? That's what I've done with conditioning myself towards recognition, notoriety. I'm not going to do it. Fame, right? In case it happens, right? There's no guarantees in this business, right? Of course, in case it happens, I've come to terms with it. I've slowly acclimated to it, got my nervous system, ready for it. And that mostly came through declaration, self-declaration within myself as to who am I, what am I doing, why am I doing it, and what's my goal. And what I always lean on, and if there's any so-called advice, the worst vice is advice, I do know that, but if I do, humor myself for this hour-long conversation, let me just say, for me, take this how you want to take it, the thing that keeps me sane, the thing that keeps me grounded, whether that's now or later, it's about the work. I have no illusions. It's about the work. I'm passionate about the work. I enjoy the work. That creative artistry, and I say artistry not in a pretentious, self-important way, but like the example I gave you, the way that I look at forensics touching my shit, that's the way that I look at them. You may look at them differently. You may ignore them. You may pretend not to see them, and that's a brilliant choice. Do that. But the way that I look at them is the way that I look at them. It's the same way that 10-year-old Billy would have looked at, John going in my backpack, in the 3rd grade. Is that John? Is he going in my backpack? And then look at the teacher like, why is John going in my backpack? That's my artistry. That's the way that I interpret. That's the way that I live in that moment. And we need you to show us how you say that's my shit. Why are you in my shit? I want to see how you do that. I showed you how I did it. I showed you what I'm hiding, how much I'm showing the cop who's questioning me when they took the phone that's not mine, and how I changed it from when they actually take my laptop, and I showed you the differentiation, of that. And this is just in a 2-page guest star audition. This is not even, ample opportunity per se, but you can still be an artist. That's my artistry. I'm showing you how 10-year-old Billy, reacts when somebody's in his shit, when somebody's trying to take his now and laters or his Twix bar, right? And I want to see how you do it. So show us how you ask somebody, why you in my shit, bro?